Peter's like, worth it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he didn't care. He was like, I've been there. I'm not going back. I know what that was like. Mm-hmm. So whatever Jesus asked me to do now, I'm standing up and I'm moving forward. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Bald Believers. I'm Jamey.
I'm Chad.
And as promised, we cover the second part of Peter's life.
Yes.
Peter's conversion, if you will, his mission,
mm-hmm. His training,
the reason he was who he was. So we look at that. Like we said earlier, man, what a character.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So Chad, give us a brief recap in case some of the people maybe they didn't see the last one, but bring them up to speed.
We get to see Peter's first meeting with Jesus when he's fishing, and he realizes that he's somebody special, but he didn't know who he is. And we get to see that Peter's the kind of guy who speaks out all the time, right? He's a pretty honest character, and by honest, I mean that he doesn't hide who he is, right? But we also see that he gets called out a lot, right? Because, like you had mentioned the last time, Jesus was preparing him for something. He was preparing for a leadership role. And in order to do that, Jesus had to break him down.
Yep. And
he got broke down 3 times pretty hard in front of people. Right, because remember Jesus asked him. We talked about this. He said, "Who do men say I am?" And he said, "But who do you say I am?" And he said, "Oh, you're the Christ." And he went on. He said, "Oh yeah." He said, "That's great. That you didn't come up with that on your own. This was revealed to you." And then Jesus goes on just a couple sentences later, a couple verses later, to say, "This is what's going to happen to me." And Peter jumps up and says, "No, it's not going to happen." And the guy he just bragged on, he said, "Get thee behind me, Satan."
Only when Jesus called Satan.
Yeah. So he had to call him out in front of everybody. This is the guy who always speaks up, and Jesus did it in a certain way for a reason, right? And then in the garden, you brought this up. They come to arrest Jesus, and here he is being Peter. He pulls out his sword, and not a good aim, cuts a guy's ear off, right? And Jesus doesn't pat him on the back, so that's okay. That's fine. I appreciate what you're doing. He said, No, put that away.
Right.
You live by the sword, you die by the sword. You put that away. So he breaks him down there. And right before that, he had just told him in front of everybody, before the cock crows, you're going to deny me 3 times.
Yeah.
So he had to be broke.
He had to be broken because like I said, Jesus was preparing him for this leadership role. Mm-hmm. And that, of course, after the crucifixion, he's crushed because his leader's gone, right? So it's like, oh man, this is over. And then we see him interacting with him again. Peter went back to what he knew, back to fishing.
Right.
So, and I think we talked about this in another episode. Mm-hmm. But as he's there in the boat, he sees Jesus. He recognizes who he is, and there he goes. Right off.
Peter.
Right off. Mm-hmm. He ain't waiting. He gets up there and he has this interaction with Jesus. But I found it interesting. So Jesus was back for 40 days. Mm-hmm. So he was here with him, Peter, during this time, and we see that that's going to launch Peter into where we're going to look at him here in a second. But what I found interesting, Matthew chapter 16, you touched on this just a minute ago whenever Jesus asked the question, "Who do you say that I am?" And that's where Peter spoke out. He says, and then Jesus' answer, this is Jesus speaking. He says, Simon Peter replied, and he said, "You are Christ, the Son of the living God." And here's what Jesus answered. He said, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter." So this is where he says, this is who you are, right? Mm-hmm. "And on this rock I'll build my church." You talked about that. "And the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I'll give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven." So that's what we need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
So this is pretty interesting. "I'm going to give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. And whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. And whatever you shall loose on earth shall be loose in heaven." So don't get that mixed up and think Peter's sitting up there with a key, opening the gate.
Right.
That's not what Jesus is talking about. When he talks about he's giving him the keys of the kingdom of heaven, people say, "What's that mean?" Well, you see what that means. You read in the book of Acts when the church is starting up. Mm-hmm. So what we see is he gives him this, and he says, "You're going to unlock the kingdom." And we say, "Really? He's going to unlock it? He's going to physically?" All right, what happens? He preaches his first sermon.
Right.
And what do we see happen?
Yeah, it's a big sermon. You might have heard of it.
You may have heard of it. 5,000 men right there.
Added to the church.
Bam. So you unlock the kingdom. It's happening. Mm-hmm. That's what I found intriguing too. So this is Peter and John. They're there at the temple. Mm-hmm. And we see that, and I think it's a whole. It's interesting. I laugh because it's a whole different character than what we saw before.
Oh yeah, there's a whole different tone about him.
Absolutely, there is. And what I thought, when I see him there, whenever he's preaching this first sermon, I went blank. The rulers of the temple, the priests,
Pharisees.
Yeah, the Pharisees there. They look at him because they thought they killed this Jesus movement.
Right.
So, but you see what happened. Peter heals a guy there.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome right there. He's just, I don't have any money to give you.
Yeah.
But here's what I do have.
Yeah.
Rise and walk.
Yeah. So we see this guy healed in the temple. We see him preach his first sermon. All these things are happening. They think, wow, we killed this Jesus movement, and here we got these guys on the scene now.
Right.
Because you ain't getting rid of Jesus.
Right. You just started something big.
Peter's unlocked the kingdom here, adding these souls to the kingdom. But what I found interesting is whenever they bring them to, and they're questioned, they're like, these guys don't have any education.
Yeah.
They don't have it. This is they don't have any learning, so they're like, we're not sure how this happened. We know how it happened.
Right,
it's a God thing.
Right, exactly.
So, God doesn't. He doesn't look and see who's qualified. He qualifies the called, right? So, and that's what he does in Peter and John's life too. But so they see this and they're like, here's what I found very, very interesting too. What do they say? They said, hey, go out, preach whatever you want. Just don't preach the name of Jesus.
Yeah. Just don't do this one thing.
Yeah, don't do this one thing.
Yeah.
And what does Peter say? They're like, we heard you saying, but it's not happening.
Yeah, we're not going to do that.
We're not going to do that.
We're still going to do this.
You know why I think he done that?
What?
I think it was fresh in his mind of where he just came from.
Oh, yeah. And look at this. Right after Jesus has ascended, when you're reading there in Acts, who's the first one speaks up? Peter's first one speaks up. Peter's the first one to pray. Right? Yeah. Peter's the first one to, I said pray, but Peter's the first one to preach. Yeah. Right? Hey, he's been prepared this whole time. He had to be broken hard in front of everybody, right? To be prepared for this. And when you see that interaction that you mentioned, when he healed that guy, this wasn't he didn't make over this real big like a Pharisee would, right? We hear about the Pharisees making a big deal. This was kind of just a casual thing. He said, look, I don't have any money, but what I do have, I'll give you. Rise and walk. Yeah. It's not like, hey, everybody pay attention to me. No, we see Peter being Peter, but he's the saved version.
Yeah.
Right? He's the version that Jesus has dealt with. Right? It's just amazing. And after that, it was something we had talked about. Peter goes up on this roof and he prays. Right? And he's fasting, and he's praying, and he's hungry, and he's waiting for supper, and he has this dream, right? And his dream is that all of this different food.
To which I'm thankful.
Yeah. He said, and he said, well, I can't eat any unclean thing. And God said, so you're going to say what I made is unclean? This is a big deal. To us today, this is not that big of a deal, right? But to a Jew, right, back then, that's a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
There was a whole list of things you can go and read that they wouldn't eat.
Yeah, so if you like bacon, wasn't on the list.
Was not on the list.
You're not going to have it.
Man, that had to be. I guess if you'd never had it.
Yeah,
right?
I guess, right.
Right. And not only this, but he's having this interaction right here, right? And this is a big revelation here that he can eat anything. There's nothing off the table, and he's kind of being prepared because somebody's coming to the door and knocking, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And who sent these guys?
Right. And so we see in what you see there is this is where he leads the first Gentile.
Yes.
So that's another huge thing, which was Cornelius. Mm-hmm. So he leads Cornelius to Christ, and you talk about the Jews and the Gentiles.
Yeah, you weren't going to see a Hebrew man go to a Gentile's house, much less one that summons him.
Yeah.
To come to his house. He sent guys he said, hey, our master said that, the Lord said you had a word for us. And what does Peter do? He'd just come down, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Once again, he's Peter being Peter, but there's something different about him.
Yeah.
Right?
There is. And like I said, those first few chapters of Acts, I don't remember if it was, I should have wrote it down. I'm thinking it's like Acts 5, maybe we see him and John again in the temple courts, And you have to remember, the last time these guys were there, right prior to the Acts 2, the last time they were there, they were fleeing.
Right.
So this time you see them, they're bold, they're different people. And like I touched a minute ago, I said, I believe wholeheartedly it's because they remembered that painful past. They remembered what it was. For Peter, he's like, I remember what it was like to deny Jesus. I remember what it was like, and I remember, because, I like how one version puts it, I think it's the Message version. It says, and he went out and he cried, and he cried, and he cried. It tells us that he went out and he wept bitterly. But to go out and to be that torn up. So for him, it's like, I don't care what they say, I'm going to do it regardless.
Right.
Because I remember what it was. I remember what my past was like, and he remembered where Jesus had brought him from. So not only this time, so he finds himself there in trouble, but he's not backing down. And this time, all of them get a beating.
Yeah.
So all the apostles that's there are getting a smackdown and getting beat for what they believe. For Peter's like, worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't care. He was like, I've been there. I'm not going back. I know what that was like. So whatever Jesus asked me to do now, I'm standing up and I'm moving forward. We see that he denied. We see these series of threes in Peter's life.
Yes.
In Acts, it continues. And it continues in the fact that Peter made the comment, he said, I'll even be arrested for you. Well, he didn't get that opportunity because he denied earlier.
Right.
But Jesus made sure he got that opportunity later.
He got it later.
Not once, not twice, but 3 times he finds himself locked up. And I think one of the last time that he's there locked up, I found this was another one of those kind of comical things. Because when the church got word that he was locked up, the church seen what all that Peter was doing, and it tells us that the church hit their knees. And they began to pray. And they prayed, and they believed what they were praying.
Right.
So they were praying wholeheartedly to free Peter.
Right.
What happens?
Yeah. Yeah, he shows up, and they don't believe it's him.
They're like, what?
Who is this?
Who's this guy?
Ooh. Yeah, we prayed and believed it, but we don't really believe it.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I think that was funny.
I thought that was pretty funny, too. Here they're wholeheartedly believing, and, we believe, God, that you can free him, and free him. Please do that. Open up. He walks out.
Yeah.
Here he is.
Yeah.
Oh.
But, and we look at this change that we see that Jesus has made in Peter's life. But there again, don't just look at all the high points, right? Because sometimes we have this tendency to we'll look at somebody like this and we'll see all these high points now and we'll think, man, I can never measure up, right? I need to live like this where I don't mess up. Well, you can't. And neither did Peter.
Nope.
Right?
Nope.
Peter made some mistakes along the way, and he got called out by a guy. You might have heard of him, Paul.
I think Paul was his name.
Paul's his name. He's mentioned once or twice in the Bible, if you read, pretty sure. and Paul speaks about this, and there's something important how Paul speaks about this when he writes his part of it. He said, I talked to Peter to his face about this.
Right. He didn't go behind his back.
Right, and he was letting the people know he was writing to. He said, I'm not gossiping here. I've already dealt with this. We dealt with this, and we dealt with it the way God suggested to deal with it. He doesn't say it like that, but that's what he did, right? It was a face-to-face interaction.
Yeah.
And what does Peter do? He doesn't bull up mad and quit and all of a sudden go stomping off and go back to fishing. He gets his error fixed.
Yeah.
Right, and he moves on. And I think it's a great lesson, another great lesson from Peter in his life on how we should live as saved people. We're not going to get it right all the time. It's not an excuse to say, okay, well, I just won't worry about it, I'll mess up. But it's also not an excuse to say I'm going to bull up mad and quit because I couldn't do it all right. Right? It's a great positive example there.
Yeah, it's one of those things that just shows another strong quality of a leader. He can realize, well, I was wrong.
Right.
And he learns from that mistake, and he moves forward. So yeah, it's seeing the kind of unfair shake that he gets.
Yeah, and it is very unfair shake.
That most people, because it's just because most people don't spend a lot of time over in the Book of Acts reading about later on in his life. They don't read about. I think you had something in 2 Peter or something.
It's 1 Peter, yeah, and because it shows the maturity of where he's at in his walk with the Lord. Because right, he does all this stuff we talked about, right? And he denies him 3 times, right? He's upset. Jesus told him it was going to happen. He didn't believe it. He said, "Oh, if it's to death, I'll follow you," right? He denies him 3 times. He's upset. When Jesus confronts him about it, right, after he's resurrected, he asks him 3 times over a fire, like you pointed out before, over a charcoal fire, "Do you love me? Do you love me?"
Which is where he denied him.
Yeah, just where he denied him. Yeah.
Us,
So, but if you read over and you see past this, where he's gotten to now in 1 Peter 3:15, one of my favorite verses, you'll hear me talk about it a lot, but Peter says, "But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason of the hope that is in you, with meekness and fear, with gentleness and respect." Right? From the guy who spoke up, from the guy who would hard charge in there, the guy who cut somebody's ear off, the guy that threw a fit. He says, with gentleness and fear, always give that answer for the hope that's in you. And like we see, if it was possible in Peter's life, and it's possible in ours.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to be a leader like Peter was to come as far as Peter did. But I just think that's amazing that he went from the denying and cutting somebody's ear off to saying, no, always give an answer, but do it with gentleness and respect.
It shows us, Chad, this progression. Mm-hmm. So it's a reminder for us too, we should be progressing.
Exactly.
You shouldn't just accept Christ and then that's it, but you should be progressing along the way. You should be gaining wisdom, gaining knowledge, and your relationship growing deeper in your relationship. And that's what Peter's showing us.
Right.
That's what we see in his life. We see early on he made mistakes. Early on we make mistakes. We still make mistakes. He showed us that. Right. Even after he was solid in his faith, he still made some oops.
Yeah. But he kept going.
What's awesome about that is when he made this mistake, Paul could have just said and let it go.
Right. Which would have been wrong.
But which is what we tend to do sometimes because it's like, it's not comfortable. Mm-hmm. But Paul knew it was maybe not comfortable, but it was right, and it was right for more than one reason. Mm-hmm. It was to help both of them.
Right. He didn't do it because he was angry with him.
No.
He did it because he cared.
Yeah, he did it because he cared about Peter, about his relationship.
Yeah.
So it's just a reminder to us, like so when you talked about that earlier, it reminds us, like, it's something that we should be doing too. Mm-hmm. But it's this progression. It's like be encouraged whenever you see this guy.
Yeah.
Because you see so many characteristics of your own life in his life.
Yes.
And probably more on the earlier side, but I hope that you find yourself more in tune with him too in his progressing like he was.
Yes.
So very, very interesting guy. Hopefully we've uncovered a few things that maybe they hadn't thought about before or seen.
So I've enjoyed it. I've really got a kick out of it. And there's more to talk about. We could. This is a 2-part. We could probably done a 4-part.
Yeah,
and I don't think we'd run out of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, it's just like I said, when we see the kind of life that he lived, and what I would encourage you is that are listening or watching is to dig in.
Yes,
dig in and study more in depth because like we just scratched the surface. This is what they call the tip of the iceberg, right?
Yeah, right.
So underneath there's a whole lot more stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of. I had a boss one time say, "Well, I'm going to give you the 30,000 foot view," right?
Yeah.
That's kind of we flew over. We give you an overview of what's happening in Peter's life, but the key takeaway is always be progressing.
Yes.
And maybe another thing is, and we talked about this in other podcasts, don't get hung up in the past.
Right.
If you get hung up in the past, Peter would have been progressing. And I think that's how we progress. We don't get hung up in the past. I've said it before, when you drive in your car, the windshield is big for a reason and the rearview mirror is small.
Right.
So because most of your attention better be ahead of you.
Exactly.
Than what's behind. It's okay to glance back every now and then to remind yourself where you came from.
Exactly.
And I think that's true in Peter's life too. I believe every now and then he probably glanced back, obviously.
Right.
Because the first part of Acts, if he hadn't been glancing back saying, I remember what it felt like, it'd been a whole different outcome.
Right.
So he was being bold in his proclamation and his stand for Christ and what that conversion, where it had brought him.
Yep.
So dig in there, scratch in there, and see what he has to reveal to you. Again, we appreciate you guys for taking a bit of your time to tune in, to listen, to watch. However you're viewing us or listening to us, we appreciate you. Again, if you're watching us and you like the videos, you hadn't subscribed, you can do that. You can subscribe there on YouTube.
You can hit the like button.
The like button to do it. Also on you can find us on Spotify and on Apple Podcast. Rate us on there too, so other people get notified about. That's how people find out about us too on there. Once you rate it, it kind of moves along the food chain, if you will.
Right, and this is not about us. This is about trying to get the Lord's word out to as many people as we possibly can.
We've said it. We're just helping spread light into a dark world.
That's it.
So we ain't looking for
100 years from now, we don't matter.
Yeah, we don't matter. So it's all about Him.
That's right.
So you can find us there. Also on Facebook, if you want to know when the latest episodes, if you're on Facebook, you can go to the Bald Believers page. You'll get notified when those episodes drop out there as well. And if you have a question for us or comment, you can email us at our email address is baldbelievers@gmail.com. If you're on Facebook, there's a button that'll take you straight to there. You can hit that. So again, guys, we appreciate you and hope that you're having a great day. Take care.
We'll see you.